Welcome back at Ask the Professor item of the MOOC. I really hope that you enjoyed already the few weeks. You already knew more knowledge and also about operations. Therefore now I'm here at ProRail head offices of the infra management in the Netherlands. One of the questions of Ask the Professor was about adhesion and adhesion limits. Why are there and what is really the limit for that? And what is the history about? When you look in the history, you see that the limitation was really the in-between times, and there was no need because there was not much trains on the rails. So why should we bother about slippery track or whatever? So you drive slow or you use sand, for example. So now we need more capacity, and therefore here at the building of ProRail, the infra management of the Netherlands, I'm sitting here, and also this is the regulation building, you could say, about these limits. Why we need these limits? Because we need a certain amount of adhesion, otherwise we get slippery track. And therefore we cannot do operations at all. So to shrink that gap, we need friction management, adhesion management, and at least we need 0.17 as a mu factor at the F adhesion. Otherwise we cannot break at a certain expectation, and that's really dangerous. So there is limitations. There are limitations in the low side. On the upside, we don't care, more or less, not yet, I must say. But on the lower side, we have 0.17, and that's really the limit. And you can find this back in the regulations of the European standardization of the TSIs of rolling stock. Another question of Ask the Professor was about, is there a priority in freight trains, passenger trains, or other trains? And yes, there you could say in Europe we have some priority, and in all countries we have some priorities, even when there is no boundary at all. Why should we do some priority to freight trains? And I think that's a really easy answer, because freight trains is a very high weight with a lot of power of the locomotive, and when you have to brake, and you have also to accelerate again, and that takes a lot of time. So the precision time when you have this brake pause or brake time is really a capacity digesting of the schedules. So what we like is that the freight train starts at a certain point, goes through the full corridor at once without any stops. And that's the game we have to do, and also the challenge when you do operations to fit exactly this freight train through the corridors on time. No stops at all, just one shot. Is it possible? That's another question, because when you have a very busy network like we have here in Holland, that's not easy to fix. But in this building, at ProRail office, we try to fix all these green waves, you could say, for these freight trains. There are no stops and just green lights to go on. Another question about Ask the Professor is about curves and how tight curves could be or will be, so we have good operations and still no problems with freight trains, passenger trains or whatever. I think the first question I have to say, I have to divide it in two, because the first question you can ask in different ways, like what about metro systems, what about tramway, what about passengers or freight trains? I think a tight curve at tramways is much smaller than a normal passenger trains or whatever. So the main problem is how tight could be a tram curve in reality. I think that could be 50 meters, no problem at all. But at the passenger trains or freight trains, we need more. And in Holland, or maybe in Europe, I could say in general, the tightest curve could be around 100 meters, but it is not so healthy because you get squeal and a lot of wear. So that would be also a limitation of if you are happy with that. I think the tighter the curve, the more wear you get, and you can hear that, like the squeal. Not nice, so please don't do. Another question about Ask the Professor was a really smart one, because I was really interested also in the question and the answer, of course. What about the relief of mass when you have two wheels and an axle? Normally it's totally full of steel. Why not make it hollow, like hollow axles? I think it's a brilliant idea, but there are also some negative effects on that. So in the early days we had also wheel spokes instead of one disc of the wheel. And therefore also you reduce a lot of mass, and mass you don't have to accelerate or to brake. So that's a perfect idea. But what happened? A lot of spokes were broken during the operations. And I think that's really the issue, because you get some fatigue, and fatigue with a hollow pipe or spoke or axle is different than just a massive axle. I think that's really the problem we have, and it is easier to detect cracks inside a massive wheel because you can use ultrasound, and you can also see when there is a crack, it can grow. And when you have a hollow wheel, it cannot grow and it will just break down, and then you have a train without an axle, and I think that's not what we like.